Hi there, friends. This is Emily Craig, and it is January the 5th, the night of the new moon, 2015. And I've been troubled by the depth and breadth of the news that we get every day. And there are reasons for me to make a statement and to stand for something. You know, there's a saying, you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. So here goes. As you know, I have written a book about my father, who was King Edward VIII, who, like my generation, the Vietnam generation, grew up with a bunch of guys who all got killed off in war. So that my generation today, who went to school in the 1950s, really has no exceptional leaders. And when Edward VIII spent 10 months being king, he was alone because his generation of young people had been wiped out in World War I. And so he had to contend with the old guys, the old geezers, the courtiers and officers who had surrounded his father, and his father had very strong opinions. And so my father was essentially deposed by treachery and secrecy, which is characteristic of secret society monarchies, let's face it. But now there are three issues that need taking care of, and I'm here to step up to the plate because somebody has to, okay? The first one has to do with monarchy versus the European Union. In Britain and in France and the other northern European countries, there are just so many immigrants and so much conflict over European Union laws that have been written over the heads of the people of Britain. And what nobody seems to understand is that the reigning monarch is not a ruler. A reigning monarch is like the checks and balances that are supposed to exist in the United States, so that the reigning monarch is supposed to oversee the ethical and moral behavior of the government and actually has powers to remove a prime minister, to fire an entire government, to call for an election, to pick out somebody who's doing wrong and exile them or reduce their personal privileges and prerogatives, let's put it that way, okay? And that hasn't happened. And it should have happened when you look at the problems with immigration and civil and human rights violations and threats by hostile minorities. There should have been a leader in Britain to stand up and speak to principles of behavior and to make educated judgments about religious minorities and whether some are more or less civil than others. And this is not getting into politics. This is getting into theology and exegesis and what's in this holy book and what's in that holy book. Okay, let's get with it. The next problem we see is the one of pedophilia. And the Queen has the power to remove the people that are involved in pedophilia, but she hasn't. Now, why? Well, if you look at the United Nations UNESCO core curriculum, it teaches that pedophilia, bestiality, and homosexuality are superior to family childbearing because it doesn't result in more people. Okay? If you look at the Quran, it teaches little girl marriage. Okay? It teaches all kinds of violence against women and children. Okay, if you look at maritime law has procurers which enable the procuring of a person as an infant in an adoption, which is what happened to me, okay, or a child in a custody suit, or some kind of lawsuit who gets turned over to CPS, or a truant teenager who goes to a reform school, or an adult who goes to a prison and serves as a prison labor slave, okay? Or even we can count in the body parts trafficking that occurs among the living for the dead, okay? Or the living for the dead for the living, okay? So all this trafficking is just business in maritime law. And so you want to just throw the customers in jail? Just throw the agents of adoption agencies in jail because they fondle children who are in deep shock and pain and despair? Who do you want to punish here? You want to punish the victims, or you want to stop the crimes? If you want to stop the crimes, the law has to be addressed. The abuse against children has to be adjudicated in common law courts that can help heal and repair the children's lives, not in maritime law courts. Divorces need to be in common law courts. Custody battles need to be in common law courts. And those are the courts that don't have fringe all over the flags, okay? And there's been a mixing of common and maritime law so that the people on the land have no protection and no rights of their own. Maritime law and finance law is just taken over everything. And the Queen is silent about this. And that's not reasonable. She should have been talking about the implications of that problem. The next thing is the Queen she made vows, okay? She vowed to protect the church, the culture, and the laws. So has she protected the church? What would she protect the church from? Have you ever heard of Tavistock Institute? It was established in 1921 by King George V, Queen Elizabeth's grandfather and my grandfather, okay? And it's the puzzle palace that teaches governments how to be double-dealing tricksters and how to do psyops on the people to get everybody under their thumb. Now, what has Queen Elizabeth had to say about the effect of Tavistock dogma and doctrine on the viability and veracity and believability of the church? She hasn't said a word. Not a word. These are three major problems that are killing English-speaking cultures. Now, it's outrageous that she is so avoidant and that she has no opinion about what's going on in her own kingdom, not to mention the Commonwealth. So I'm going to do something equally outrageous. I'm drafting a claim against the Queen of England for treason, and I'm going to pursue a claim to take over the estate and the throne of my father, King Edward VIII. Somebody's got to do something, and I believe I'm qualified to handle what is not even a kingdom legally anymore. Do you realize that it's the United Kingdom Corporation? It's about as corporate as Disneyland. They're not interested in people, just any more like any other corporation. And so this has got to be turned around and confronted and addressed. And I'm going to go the distance. And yes, you can laugh at me. Here's this 70-year-old woman, 70-year-old woman taking on Queen Elizabeth and her entire hierarchy. And by the grace of God, we'll see how far we get with it, okay? So I'll have some links down below, and we'll see how far we get this. Thank you. Bye.